I'm Penny Jones here from Data Center Dynamics. I'm with Andrew Jones, who's an Auquist consultant. Andrew, can you first of all tell us a little bit about Auquist?
Sure. Auquist are a consultancy that provides CRC consultancy with a particular focus in the data center. We've also got some technologies that we use in the data center to help monitor energy consumption.
What kind of companies are you working with as a CRC consultancy?
So the sort of companies we're working with tend to be large colo providers and a lot of financial institutions, all of whom have large data centers.
And do they understand the CRC? What sort of level of understanding are they?
I think the recognition of CRC is gradually becoming very good. Of course, the government have changed the plan completely in the comprehensive spending review and completely rewritten the rules. The difficult thing is that we don't quite know what the rules are just yet. We're still waiting for clarification of the detail from the Department of Energy and Climate Change and the Environment Agency. So until that comes out, we're a little bit in the dark. But I think some of the more underlying issues are important, not just the CRC, but the fact that with some limited resources in terms of generation capacity in this country, and I think those are the underlying issues that are as important as understanding the CRC itself.
When you say limited resources, can you explain for our audience what you mean by that?
Sure. Very specifically, and taking one particular example, looking at, for example, the nuclear capacity that we have in this country. For the last 20 years, we've not replaced that capacity. Nuclear represents about 20% of the UK's capacity. But I think it's by 2016 we're down to 2 nuclear plants. By 2023 we've got just the 1 nuclear plant left. So that's 20% of our generation capacity that is going. It's on a very clear decommissioning timeline. And unfortunately the government over the last 20 years has failed to be able to replace that with different capacity.
What should the data center operators' responsibility be in this issue then, or how should they look at CRC?
I think one of the challenges, I notice a lot of people in the data center space are keen to challenge the CRC and consider it rather an unfair imposition of a tax on their operations. I think it's important for them to realise that the real issue is not so much the carbon reduction commitment itself. It's the fact that the politicians are having to impose this legislation on us because they need to bridge the energy gap. We have demand on the increase, electricity demand is increasing, and at the same time we have generation capacity being in decline. And those two things are going to result in a clear price increase. So the politicians are using the CRC as a mechanism to constrain the demand, but equally they're going to need to provide additional capacity.
Should I know the concern with data center operators has been, even listening to your talk, has largely been about cost. Does this ethos need to shift? Do they need to be thinking about responsibility, corporate social responsibility as well in this sense?
I think it's an important point that I think a lot of the data center marketers, well, let's look at the issue that they need to address. The real issue they need to address is the country has a lack of generation capacity. So the government are using whatever mechanisms they can use, which is principally taxation, to drive people to become more efficient. So the data center market is going to need to become familiar with an era when year on year they need to be reducing their energy consumption. And for a lot of them that is quite a challenge.
Why does the government not come out and just simply say this?
It's a very good point. I draw it out of my talk that I did earlier. I don't understand why the government don't just make it clear that we have an increase in demand whilst at the same time a decrease in capacity, and just let people work out for themselves that results in the price increasing.
Yeah.
I think probably the reason they don't make that clear is that we might quite reasonably ask, what have they been doing for the last 20 years? Why have they failed to replace this infrastructure?
Are we the only country in Europe that is in this position?
No, a lot of Western Europe is in a similar situation. We, in Western Europe, have enjoyed really exponential growth on the back of extracted hydrocarbons, particularly in the UK. We've been very rich in the hydrocarbon resource that we've got. Principally as a result of us living on the continental shelf, the edge of the continental plates. That's where the hydrocarbons tend to be focused. We've enjoyed fantastic growth on the back of extracting those hydrocarbons. But increasingly we're finding those are being delivered, particularly in the form of gas, via vast intercontinental gas pipelines from places very far away.
So countries like France that have nuclear power installed, is that?
France, I think, are one of the very few exceptions. France have been very lucky. They have, for a long time, invested in nuclear capacity, and they're one of the few countries that, as a result, have an embedded technical resource to build nuclear facilities. In fact, you'll find any of the new facilities that get built in this country, in the UK, will probably be delivered by French companies because they continue to have the expertise to build these things.
So you're a consultant, you work with co-location companies who are likely to be affected by this probably a lot more than other players, particularly CRC. What do you say to people who are thinking about investing in a brand new co-location data center in the UK? Is it a viable move? Is there a time frame on it? Or is there other things they should be considering?
I think the data center space will need to consider very carefully the amount of energy they use. I mean, this applies not just in the UK, it's going to apply all around the world. They need to recognise that they're going to need to build facilities where they can be reducing their energy consumption year by year, whilst at the same time growing their business. And that is quite unfamiliar territory and will be quite a challenge. But it's not unlike other problems they have. For example, human resources. You know, we have a limited pool of people, and yet we're capable of growing our business with that limited pool of people. And I think energy is going to become the same constraint. People will need to strategically and carefully manage its use, and the people that are successful at that will prosper, and those that don't will suffer the consequences.